Do you sometimes have a hard time believing or having faith in the resurrection of Jesus? Is it difficult for you sometimes to accept that Jesus has actually risen from the dead? Is it hard to experience the peace and the joy that this faith in the resurrection should bring? Sometimes I think for all of us, we experience these doubts, and it can fill us with a sense of confusion or maybe guilt that we don't truly believe in the resurrection of Jesus, that we can't just get it. Today in the gospel, we see that if we have these doubts, we're in good company. Jesus' disciples also had doubts that he had truly risen from the dead. They had a hard time accepting and understanding the consequences that Jesus' resurrection would have for them in their life. Sometimes we can think that when Jesus rose from the dead, his work was done. Mission accomplished, he could go and relax. But we're finding in these Gospels after Easter that even after Jesus has risen from the dead, his mission continues. Jesus goes and announces his own resurrection to his disciples in his very person, and he goes out of his way to convince them that he is truly risen because they have doubts. And he goes out of his way to tell them the consequences, the implications that the resurrection should have for their lives here and now. We see this clearly in the Gospel of today, taken from the end of Luke chapter 24. Yesterday we heard about the story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus. In today's Gospel, Jesus enters a gathering of his disciples who are gathered there together, and they're talking about all the things that have been happening. They're talking specifically about what happened to those two disciples on the road to Emmaus. And Jesus Christ enters this gathering of the disciples, and the first words he says to them is peace. Peace be to you. And then we see that the disciples start to doubt. Is this really Jesus? We read in Luke's gospel that they think he is a ghost. And what happens next is very significant. Jesus doesn't chastise them for their doubt. We're hearing that they have doubts in their heart, that they have fear. Jesus doesn't scold them, he doesn't chastise them. Instead, Jesus goes out of his way to convince them, to give them proofs that he has actually risen from the dead. His mission continues. Jesus says, "Come and touch me, know that I am not a ghost." And then Jesus says in this intriguing detail, "Do you have anything to eat?" Then they give him a piece of cooked fish, and he eats it to prove that it is actually him, not a ghost. It is Jesus Christ, and he has risen from the dead. Because of this, they should be filled with peace, and they too will be sent on a mission to proclaim the resurrection. This is ultimately good news for us because we too, all of us at different times, can experience doubt that Jesus is truly risen from the dead. We can have difficulties in understanding or comprehending the significance that this has for us in our life, that we should experience peace and joy. This goes especially for a time like this that we're living through in this pandemic. To experience the joy and the peace of the resurrection can be difficult. But we see that Jesus, just as for his disciples, continues his mission to proclaim the resurrection to us. Just like his disciples, Jesus will give us proofs. He will work for us in our life to convince us that he's truly risen from the dead. He can do this in a variety of ways. Maybe we can have some experiences of Jesus' love and goodness through the people in our own lives. Perhaps a moment of prayer can convince us at that time that Jesus is risen from the dead, or maybe it's something that we read. We just always have to have that open heart to listen to Jesus, to see how he is working in our lives. We take great hope and comfort today then in our gospel reading that even Jesus, after Jesus has risen from the dead, his mission continues. He continues to go and convince his followers that he is indeed risen, and he will do the same for us in our lives. God bless you and take care.